AITA for wanting to end a marriage over wife's refusal to own up to cheating and abuse. Throwaway account because my wife follows my main. Lot of backstory here, so I'll try to keep it concise. I, M37, have been married to S, F32, for 13 years. We have 2 school-age children. We both come from dysfunctional childhood/family dynamics, though in different ways. Because of this, our marriage has always been rocky, as neither of us were truly prepared for/understood how to have a healthy relationship. One of the biggest sources of conflict in our marriage has been my health. Right before we met, I was diagnosed with kidney failure. It has been a constant stressor in our relationship, as over the last 13 years I've had a cumulative time of 5 years of dialysis and 2 kidney transplants. Even when I have a working donor kidney, which I currently do, life gets messed with due to the precautions and restrictions a transplant patient lives under. Despite my health, I have always been the sole financial provider for our family. By her choice, I've always tried to encourage her to pursue whatever avenue she desires, be it being a som, going to school, going to work, etc. One of the ongoing complaints has been that my health has been an excuse for not being a good enough husband. S has frequently complained about me being distant, unavailable, unaffectionate, or not understanding the stress she's under having to warp her life around my health concerns. It came to a head early last year. She said that she felt distant from me, and in her eyes we were basically roommates and co-parents, and if she did anything with someone else it would be my fault for not giving her what she needed. My point of view at the time was that there were 2 people in this marriage, and that if she wasn't willing to work on things with me, I wasn't going to continue to put in the effort by myself in the hopes that eventually she would be willing to understand the issues/concerns I myself had. I also made it very clear that as long as we were still married, if she was with someone else it would be cheating. Around this time she started connecting with a new group of friends she met online. Her time was mostly taken up by chatting with that group. Our interactions with each other were pretty minimal during this time, though not non-existent. We still spent time together, watching shows, the occasional date, etc., but otherwise I was busy working, homeschooling our kids, taking care of the house, and my own hobbies. She spent all day on chats and calls and scrolling, and started going to meetups with the people from this friend group that lived nearby. She had always suffered from depression and anxiety, and initially I was happy that she had found people to connect with and seemed to cheer her up a bit. She went on a small number of trips during this time with some of the local friends, which I was fine with. She also started having secretive conversations. I would find myself locked out of our bedroom, to discover she was on the phone. I found her hiding in the closet talking on the phone. Every time she would refuse to tell me who/what it was about, saying she deserved her privacy and didn't have to tell me anything. I felt uneasy, but tried to tell myself I was overreacting, nothing was going on, etc. Summer of last year she wanted to have a meetup with a larger group of her online friends. She asked if we could buy a plane ticket for one of the friends from back east who couldn't afford to make it. In the end I paid for the Airbnb, rental car, and flight for one of these friends to fly across the country for this meetup. Turned out it wasn't the entire friend group, it was my wife, her best friend, and the person from back east was a guy she'd been talking to privately. During the 3-day trip she ended up sleeping with him. She confessed to me when she got home, and seemed legitimately shocked at how devastated I was. She maintained that she did not cheat, that she had told me we were separated. Over the next several months things teetered on the brink of divorce. She was frequently volatile and aggressive. At one point she trashed my office, breaking several $1,000s worth of equipment and possessions. Through it all I decided to try and fight for my marriage. She wanted to pursue things with that guy, and when that eventually fell apart she was willing to try again with me. During these months she started drinking heavily. Until that year, she had basically never had alcohol. By last summer, she was going through a bottle of vodka a day. I tried to get her help, but nothing stuck. She wouldn't go to meetings, we tried rehab but she checked herself out after 12 hours. This pattern basically continued, and honestly prevented us from actually fixing anything in our relationship because she was just always drunk. This continued more or less consistently until present day. About a month ago she had a drunken episode where she mixed some prescription meds she's on with the alcohol, and she became violent. She shoved me into some furniture hard enough that I had a cantaloupe-sized bruise on my side. After that I told her I didn't feel safe being around her when she drank. I started sleeping outside the bedroom whenever she got drunk as much as possible, which was roughly 3 to 4 days a week at this point. Labor Day weekend, she started poking at me about our marriage. Saying she felt alone and isolated again, and I was pushing her to find what she needed elsewhere again. I told her that what she did before was cheating, and if she did it again it would also be cheating, and that it was impossible to improve our relationship when she wouldn't own up to her own actions or what they've done to me. I told her I didn't feel safe, emotionally or physically, and I didn't see how anything could improve until we both learned how to properly communicate. She said maybe we should separate and she go to her mom's. I said maybe she was right. She kicked me out of the room at that point on threat of breaking my computers that were in the bedroom. I slept in my office, and the next day she was drunk by 9 a.m. Unbeknownst to me, she was also mixing it with her pills again. She became extremely aggressive in her tone and demeanor. I took the kids and went to run errands. She started blowing up my phone saying she was going to call the cops on me for kidnapping. Started harassing me in text saying she was going to keep the kids from me, that she was going to ruin my life, all sorts of stuff. When we got home, I tried to seclude myself in my office. She came in fighting, because she was demanding to write a letter stating that I wanted no part in her grandma's house, which my wife was given by her grandma earlier this year. I begged her to leave me alone, said we could discuss all the divorce stuff when she's sober. I was in a full-blown anxiety attack at this point. She punched me in the face and started trying to break stuff in my office. Our kids came to investigate because of the noise, and called their grandma, my mother-in-law. My wife left the office at that point. MIL shows up, I explain what happened, told her she needs to take her daughter and leave. She finally convinces her to go, but tries to take the kids. I said the kids needed to stay because they started school the next day and it was 2 days of placement testing. I'm their teacher/coach for the program, and they needed to be here with me where I could help them. My MIL started getting ugly with me about the kids, saying I wasn't going to take the kids from my wife, that she'd do whatever she had to make sure my wife had the kids. While she was arguing with me, my wife threw a 64-ounce steel-insulated thermos at me, which I reflexively tried to block with my arm that has my dialysis fistula. Immediately my fistula started swelling and bruising. I panicked and ran to my phone and called 911. Asked for paramedics, for my arm, and police because my wife was being physically abusive. As soon as I called 911, my MIL also called and said we were fighting. She then proceeded to go downstairs and begin coaching the kids, my 9-year-old daughter and her own 8-year-old son, on what to say when the police arrive. Police show up, I step outside to talk to them, paramedics clear my arm enough to drive myself to the ER once everything else is resolved, and then the next thing I know I'm being arrested. Officer tells me that everyone's story lines up except on one detail. According to my MIL and my son, officer was apparently under the assumption my 8-year-old brother-in-law was my kid. My wife never threw a bottle at me, that I was beating on her, and when I pulled back to swing again I bumped my arm on the railing. I got out on bail, and am now facing domestic abuse charges. My wife immediately tried to reconcile after my release, saying that she was done drinking, now she wanted to go to therapy, wanted us to get help. I've been very distant, because it's really hard to be affectionate or even feel safe around her. The few times we've tried to talk about what happened, she gets mad at me and tells me she's more hurt than I am because I called the cops on her. She completely denies that I had any right to feel unsafe, that she did anything wrong or out of line, and that my calling the cops was both a betrayal of her, I tried to put her in jail, and that I deserve what I got by calling them. She also feels her mom was completely justified in lying to the police in order to make sure I went to jail instead of her. She's backpedaled on the therapy, and is getting mad at me for not trying harder to be a good husband in the 10 days I've been home. Any attempt to explain my feelings about all this, or why I'm hesitant to be physically or emotionally vulnerable with her again right away. Her refusing to own up to any of the behaviors that have caused me significant harm has me seriously considering divorce. At this point my biggest hesitation is losing my kids, which would be absolutely devastating for both me and them. Really unsure what to do, or if, as my wife keeps insisting, I'm really the AH here and all of this is my fault.